let's bring in now former Labor State Director and former Chief of Staff to Bill Shorten, Cameron Milner, and news.com.au Deputy Editor Liz Burke. Great to see both of you.
Thank you.
Well, let's have a look at Labor's social media ban for kids. Now, this was originally a policy that Peter Dutton first suggested, but now there are key coalition figures like Alex Antic and Matt Canavan who are expressing concerns, and they also say they're not going to vote for the laws. Have a look.
I don't think it should be passed this week. I don't understand the haste here. It is a joke, it is an embarrassment, and we should pause this, extend the inquiry, and let's take a bit more time to consider this world-leading legislation.
So I don't support it. I don't think the words ban and media should ever be in a sentence together. I'm concerned about a whole range of issues. The creep is one of them. The powers given to the Commissioner.
Now, the issue of concern, Cameron, is that everyone would need to give a digital ID. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying that's the concern that figures and people, Australians are holding, that everyone, adults included, would need to give a digital ID. Labor hasn't actually spelled out how these laws would work, and that's part of the problem.
Well, I think the good thing is that there's genuine bipartisan support to actually stop this sewer that is social media out there, polluting our young people with shameless information. Look, we don't let them take tobacco or smoke or drive a car or get married before they're 16. So I think 16 is a very good and very reasonable, sensible decision. So let's work out the detail. But the macro is we've got to turn off this tap, we've got to stop the sewer, and we've got to stop social media polluting our young people's minds.
Yeah, Liz, I think most parents, and this is obviously Peter Dutton's sense because he's backing these laws, most parents do want a social media ban for kids. It's very hard for them to enforce. But there is, at the same time, growing concern that everyone would have to give their identity to use the internet.
Yeah, that's right. And like you said, there's not heaps of detail around that at the moment. The Senate committee did publish its its report this evening, and there is a recommendation in there around the digital ID. So that's going to force some detail there. I think we'll certainly, start to see a bit more of what's actually going to be proposed and what could be effective. I think, though, like you said, it's a very popular proposal among parents, and a lot of people who support this, I don't think are really concerned with the detail. Like you said, Cameron, it's more about the macro, and I think there's a rush to get this through. There's both a real rush from the government to get a popular policy through ahead of an election, and I think there's a perceived rush among parents that's more to do with, I guess, the fleeting nature of youth. I mean, in reality, these laws aren't going to be in effect until, 2026. They won't actually be able to enforce that legislation. But I think there's the fear that if it's delayed any further, then more and more Australian children are going to outgrow these protections. So if it's delayed any further, if it's not going to get passed, then, that just kind of leaves more children vulnerable.
Cameron, I want to turn to your piece in the Nightly. Now, I think you're predicting a March 8 election day. That's my birthday, by the way. So these could be, if you're right, this week could be the last week of the Albanese government last sitting week before the election. What do you think? What are you hearing about when the election's going to be called?
Well, I don't think they can keep going the way they are. I mean, Parliament is an absolute schmozzle, the Greens and Liberals are tag-teaming their attacks on Labor, and Labor's being sort of beaten up around the chambers all around the place, and they've lost control of Parliament. So there's no point to go back. And I don't think the budget is going to be the bounce they want either. So leaving it right out to May doesn't make a lot of sense. Calling election straight after Christmas when people are feeling good about themselves, got a bit of a buzz, calling on Australia Day for March 8, I think makes an awful lot of sense.
If people are feeling good about themselves, I mean, there's going to be a lot of families who are going to be struggling to buy Christmas presents for their children. There'll be disappointed children. It could be a complete mess. Liz, what's your sense? Do you think the Prime Minister is going to want to return to Parliament next year, or will he try and avoid that?
I think there's a pretty good case, like he just said, to avoid it. I mean, things aren't really going to get better for families, between now and Australia Day between now and March 8, between now and May 25, if that's when the election is. Cost of living's not going to go down, affordability's not going to get any easier. Things are likely to get worse for families. The only sense in holding out would be maybe if they're banking on, a rate cut, but that's, you wouldn't put your money on that now. It's not going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen before March. It's very unlikely to happen before May. And we know also that the budget is slated for May 25 with the numbers that they've got to work with. March 25 with the numbers that they've got to work with. It's going to be really, really difficult to produce an election-winning budget. So if they can avoid that altogether, then that's probably an advantage.
Yeah, Cameron, what do you reckon about this? Because Jim Chalmers has delivered 2 surpluses, a huge feat. The coalition wasn't able to deliver a surplus, but the next budget will be in severe deficit. So do you think they're going to want to avoid that, or they're just going to have the budget and argue that, well, they delivered 2 and the coalition didn't?
Well, I think it's good that we got surpluses, but I don't think voters who are under massive crisis, cost of living crisis, really particularly care about that. They do care about Labor debt and deficit, though, and they'll care about the fact that Chalmers in March next year has to tell everyone that inflation's going back up again. His budget only buys those power bills for so long, and they'll have to return to what the RBA is saying, which is that interest rates and inflation are under pressure in the back half of 2025. So the budget is not going to be a great document because of externalities, not because of what Chalmers' plan is, but because he's actually got to bring to book all those problems that Labor's got on the horizon, and voters will then see it in plain writing.
And Liz, Dutton does still have the edge. The coalition traditionally has the edge on economic management, but I mean, that's even exacerbated given the extreme cost of living crisis that Australians are going through. Yeah,
and look, I mean, if Cameron's right about his election date, maybe it'll be a Dutton government that has to hand down the next budget anyway, which is looking pretty dismal. But it'll be an easier sell for them to have to, deliver a budget that's maybe not so popular when they're being seen as being lumped with Labor's mess than it would be for Chalmers to have to hand down his budget when he's been, I guess, in control of the economy for all these years. But with the surplus issue, I mean, do voters really care about a surplus? I think especially in times like now, it's more about, what's in it for me as a voter. I often see the surplus as, governments crowing about having all of this excess amount of money, although that's not really exactly what it is. It's almost like, if you're working at a company and they're announcing delivering massive profits for their shareholders, but as an employee you're going, well, where's my pay increase? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think a surplus is as impressive and as much of a vote winner
People
as
worry
maybe
about
governments do.
Their own family budget.
Yeah, exactly.
First and foremost, completely. Cameron, question without notice, as they say. Do you think there's any chance Albanese will be rolled before the next election?
Ooh.
Well, that's the other reason for not coming back, because the last opportunity for caucus to neck him this year was yesterday, unfortunately. So if the Labor comes back, there'll be 4 more caucus meetings and 4 more opportunities. So going to election before Labor caucus can actually review him might be a good thing.